and I know I'm totally not the target audience, but it really speaks to
Maybe
my
you are.
sensibility. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I
Maybe
am.
you are.
Yeah.
You are definitely a man of the 90s. And I was, we were just talking before, we have about a decade of age between us. But I cognitively grew up in the 90s and remembered them.
Mm,
I was born in the 80s, so I don't really remember the 80s. I was born in 85, but
mm.
I remember very much the 90s, and the 90s was a wonderful time for pop culture and media. It was a golden era of just awesomeness. Music, like mainstream music, was never better than it was in the
Yeah, yeah,
90s.
and there
Like,
was such a diversity of it.
oh
Like,
my
talk about diversity of
God.
music, like, because like, grunge exploded, right? So you had the
Yep.
rock thing, and you still had
Yep.
heavy metal going strong. Then you
Hmm.
had like the rap hip hop
Yep.
explosion, like really took off in the early 90s.
Hmm.
And then you had R&B and soul, and we still have all of that, but not at least. And I don't know, maybe this is me being a little out of touch with what's going on now, but everything, like, it doesn't seem as uh diverse, the popular music. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it
No,
is.
no, you are absolutely right. What I think you are observing, and let me know if this sort of aligns with your thinking.
Hmm.
Every genre you just said had mainstream household recognition in some way, shape, or form. Even stuff like ska, like you had the third wave ska revival that was huge. Sublime, like all of these band, like everything. The Grateful Dead were still going. You had Fish. You had all the jam bands doing their thing. You had such a wide range of music, alternative rock, all of this stuff. Because alternative kind of took the place of grunge, and
Hmm.
then you also have the pop punk. The pop punk came.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny. Nirvana blew up with Nevermind, and then when Nirvana ceased to be, Dookie blew up in
Yeah, yeah,
94, right?
yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
that
Green
crazy to
Green
think
Day,
about? And
right?
then that exploded all that stuff happening. And you have like Blink 182 and all those bands kind of popped up out of nowhere. So it's kind of interesting how, but what do all of these things have in common that maybe they don't today? All of this stuff was mainstream, like
Right.
super
It
duper
wasn't
mainstream.
niche. Yeah.
Right. And everything has consolidated and collapsed. Like you have people that took like emo music and combined it with rap in the aughts,
Hmm.
and you had like stuff like where people are rapping and doing emo vocals, like a really weird, like everything started to collapse on itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now like pop is mainstream and rap hip hop is mainstream, but everything else is like obscure niche, like alternative rock is like a shell, heavy metal is a shell. But in the 90s, these were such huge giants of industry within the realm.
Yeah.
The Beatles came back with the anthology that was ginormous. So it's just this incredible, and then the not also with movies too. Just the movies that came out in the 90s are insane. So you're this like incredible decade. So to come back to the 90s
Hmm.
is so fun. The 90s were a simpler time too. And yes, there was tumultuous things happening, great injustices happening all the time, as there is with every decade. But I just mean in terms of when you compare today and everything that's happening today, and then compare it to the 90s, things were simpler. It was just not as fractured and subjective as it was in the 90s. I don't know. That's the best way I could describe it. I mean, Broadway was having this ginormous revival. You had like
Yeah,
Rent was
like,
coming out.
Broadway was hip for a time in the
Yeah.
90s. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, totally.
TV, you had Friends and Seinfeld and like Frasier and X Files and Tales from the Crypt. I mean, it was just MTV. You had these crazy cartoon shows, Beavis and Butthead. Like, there's just all this incredible stuff, like stuff that would never, movies and films and TV that would never happen today. You'd
Right.
find it on a YouTube channel being made independently by a single filmmaker artist, paying for it out of their own pocket. A studio would never throw money at
Right.
something like Ren and Stimpy or Beavis and Butthead and be like, that's a good idea. you know?
And we were still getting, like, at least as far as theatrical movies were going, like we were still getting a really good number of high budget prestige, like
Right.
adult films, not pornos, but like films aimed at adults.
And they were original. They weren't necessarily, yes, you had stuff like the Brady Bunch and the Beverly Hillbillies and stuff that was
Oh,
revivals
totally.
of old shows, Addams Family, but you had original ideas like, look at like Face Off or something, like just like you had like original like movie ideas that were coming out. You had the straight to video market, which was like just this incredible place where like a lower form of Hollywood was happening, this like micro version of Hollywood where you had just like schlock coming out that was wonderful, and all sorts of stuff. The 90s as a decade has left a really nice, beautiful corpse to revisit. So when a show like Yellow Jackets takes us back to that golden year of 96, it's really awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
And yes, they're tugging on your
Nostalgia strings.
generational X nostalgia strings. That's what they're doing. They're totally doing that. I mean,
But at the
Jurassic
same,
Park, Scream. I mean,
right,
there's so
right.
much stuff.